We ask the questions. What is needed in the world? Is that going
In less than a month, another monumental step in the Egyptian revolution, the election of a president. After months of uncertainty, the final list of candidates has been announced, but who will win? Not only the Egyptian people, but the entire Middle East and the world beyond is taking stock and closely evaluating those in the race. What are their priorities domestically? How do they view the role of religion? And what will happen to Egypt's relationship with the United States and Israel? Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, we put those questions to one of the leading candidates, a former member of the Muslim Brotherhood, but now running as an independent, Aboul Fotouh. Aboul Fotouh, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Firstly, who do you see as your constituency? Who do you think is going to vote for you?
Since we began our campaign, we've been banking on and targeting the mainstream Egyptian voter. The mainstream Egyptian voter does not belong to any specific political party or movement, and that's the reality for the majority of the Egyptian people. Their main loyalty and allegiance is to Egypt, and they want a strong and independent country and are looking for a president who represents all Egyptians. That is what encouraged me to nominate myself as an independent candidate who does not represent any political party. My allegiance is to the Egyptian people and to everything Egypt stands for in terms of independent sovereignty, Egypt's Arab identity, Egypt's Islamic identity, Egypt's relationship with Africa and with the world and humanity at large. These are the main ideals that the people hold, and they are what they want implemented through a nationalist development programme following the January the 25th revolution.
So you're not focusing on any group, a religious group or a political group. You are focusing on people as a whole.
Naturally, I'm indeed depending on the average Egyptian. Having said that, my belief and pride in moderate political Islam means I expect to gain support from Islamist voters as well as the average Egyptian whose support I'm relying on. Also, my good relationships with the socialists, the liberals and all sections of Egyptian society makes me expect to gain votes from them too. Based on this, I think it's fair to say that there's really only one candidate who truly represents all sections of Egyptian society, and that candidate is indeed Aboul Fotouh, myself. I hope I can live up to these expectations and that I'm able to represent the people and stay true to the trust they've put in me, because truly I do feel their trust and support when I'm out campaigning and touring the country. Now, in terms of the organisational structure I'm depending on to get elected, the number of people working on my campaign across Egypt has now reached over 100,000. They include volunteers from all walks of life and all political backgrounds: Islamists, socialists, Christians, liberals, Salafists, members of the Muslim Brotherhood. All of them represent the nationalist project. From the beginning, we announced that ours is an ongoing project that is not only tied to the presidential election. We intend to continue working towards implementing our nationalist project of development.
What sort of constitution would you like to see?
I'm in favour of a mixed political system. Following the revolution, Egypt is not suited for a pure presidential system because that could lead to another oppressive, pharaoh-like leader. And at the same time, a pure parliamentary system is not suitable either because the political parties here are not yet strong enough to properly compete with each other. That's why I've said that the best model for Egypt in the coming 10 to 15 years is a mixed system, a presidential parliamentary system. And this is what most people are expecting to be included in the new constitution, because most Egyptians are in favour of this mixed system, as are most of the presidential candidates.
So you see this presidential campaign as part of a wider process. It's not just running for president that you are doing.
you are attempting to transform the whole society while doing so.
ده صحيح إن أنا الحملة الرئاسية تدشين لمشروع وطني.
That's correct. My campaign is the personification of a nationalist project that represents all Egyptians, that strives towards building the Second Republic, a post-January the 25th Egypt that is democratically ruled by civilians and governed by a constitution. A state that draws its legitimacy from the Egyptian people, whose main identity derives from a deep-rooted Islamic civilization, where everyone, Egyptians and other Arabs, Muslims and Christians, have played a role throughout history.
وبالتالي نحن نريد أن نقيم دولة ديمقراطية ناهضة.
Based on this, we want to build a democratic, resurging nation, one that is technologically, intellectually and economically advanced. We want to build a strong national army which depends on itself in terms of arming and training in order to safeguard and defend this Egyptian renaissance. We want to build a nation and state that reaches out to all of humanity, East and West, to Africa, the Arab and Muslim world. We are open to the entire world. Egypt has a great and ancient history and can never live in isolation. In fact, it's Egypt's duty towards humanity, because of our great civilization, to reach out to other cultures and work together for the sake of development, human rights, and all the noble ideals of humanity.
We'll get back to the point about Egyptian foreign policy and its place in the world a little bit later, but before then, there is still no new constitution in this country. There's a possibility that you could be elected as president without any constitutional definition of what you are doing. Do you see this as a problem? Do you see this as an issue? Or would you rather see more time taken to draw up a constitution?
أنا يعني لا أرى أن هناك إشكالية في انتخابات الرئاسة.
I don't see a problem with regards to the presidential election, because as you know, there is already a constitutional decree which consists of 62 articles governing this current interim period. This constitutional decree already stipulates the role of the president, as it does the parliament. And on that basis, we've already had parliamentary elections, and on that same basis, the president will also be elected. After that, the army and the military council can return to their barracks and to their true role, which is defending the country. As for writing the new constitution, then that should take its course once a constituent assembly is appointed, together by the president and the parliament. It's important that this process takes its due course so that we can have real discussions, so the constitution can reflect the aspirations of the Egyptian people in terms of freedom, dignity, and social justice. Once the new constitution is written and the people have voted on it in a referendum, then the roles and responsibilities of the president, the parliament and the government can be adjusted accordingly. Therefore, I don't believe we have a constitutional problem at the moment. The president and the parliament will work according to the temporary constitutional decree until the new constitution is written.
Would you expect the military, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, to hand over all the executive powers that it has at present to the president who is elected?
أنا لا أتصور أن المجلس العسكري أو الجيش ليس أمامه أي شيء.
I don't believe that the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, that is the SCAF, or the army have any option but to return to their barracks and hand over power to the elected president. The SCAF and Field Marshal Tantawi have already announced that they will, because they know very well that the Egyptian army is a professional one, which has no role to play in politics, and whose duty it is to safeguard and protect our borders. As for the Egyptian people, following their revolution and their continued call for change, they will not settle for anything less than a civilian president elected in democratic elections. And they will not allow the military to remain in power for a single day after June the 30th. This is accepted by the SCAF, and it has already been decreed by the Egyptian people, whose will supersedes everything.
I want to take you back to your student days, way back in the 1970s, when you were head of the student union at university. You confronted Anwar Sadat. It's a documented occasion. You challenged him. You accused those around him of being hypocrites. You challenged him on his abrogation of religious freedoms. Did that set the course for you?
لم يكن هذا بداية الطريق. أنا بدأت طريق العمل العام والسياسي في أواخر.
That wasn't the beginning of my journey. I started my political life in the late 1960s and early 70s, and this incident with Sadat, may God rest his soul, took place in February 1977, and then I had already been politically active in the youth, student and Islamist movements for over 8 years. That incident with Sadat reflected my position in terms of calling for freedoms, be it freedom of expression or freedom to preach, freedoms which Sadat suppressed at the time through the banning of a Muslim icon and scholar, Mohammad Ghazali, who was a preacher of moderate Islam and who was loved by the Egyptian people then and is still loved by them now. That was one of the reasons, amongst others, why I confronted Sadat.
كان سبب أحد أسباب الصدام مع السادات.
Also, despite the limited freedoms that were afforded at the time, Sadat did not understand that power belonged to the people and that the president of Egypt worked for the people. Instead, during that time, and to a much greater extent after that, the president believed that the people worked for him. The Egyptian people have a great sense of self-determination, and politicians, parliament and the president work for them and not the other way round.
Throughout the times, throughout decades, you were a driving force in the Muslim Brotherhood. It was your whole political and religious home. You chose to part ways on the face of it over a dispute about whether or not you should stand for president at the time that the organization said it would not have a candidate. But was it sparked by this incident, or is your parting from the Muslim Brotherhood something that took a period of time?
الحقيقة تصحيح للمعلومات أن كان بيتي السياسي هو كل مصر.
Allow me to correct you. My true political home has always been Egypt. My work with the Muslim Brotherhood was a means towards serving my country, as was my work with other organizations like the unions and syndicates.
التواصل مع الأحزاب أو مع الوسط السياسي العام.
However, there are two important issues behind my disagreement with the Muslim Brotherhood aside from my presidential nomination, and they are very important. First, I am against the Muslim Brotherhood's participation in party politics. The Brotherhood should not become a political party, nor should it have a political party, because its founder, Hassan al-Banna, may God have mercy on his soul, founded the Muslim Brotherhood as an Islamic social welfare movement, which raises awareness of Islam without competing for government, be it legislative or executive. I mentioned this in 2007 when I wrote that it is wrong to mix this missionary and awareness-raising work with party politics. However, if a member of the Muslim Brotherhood wants to run in elections or compete for government, then they should do so as an independent or join a political party or even form their own party away from the Muslim Brotherhood. This separation should be a practical one and not necessarily an ideological one.
نقطة رئيسية في الخلاف هو إن جماعة الإخوان لابد أن تقنن نفسها. لا يمكن أن تستمر بعد الثورة في وضع غير قانوني.
The second reason for my disagreement with the Brotherhood is my belief that the Muslim Brotherhood must legalize itself. Following the revolution, it cannot continue to work outside the law. It must seek a legal permit or license to operate and be transparent in terms of its structure, administration and finance, especially because I know very well that none of the Muslim Brotherhood's goals nor their practices are illegitimate. In fact, their aims and their methods are very much legitimate, and that's why there is no justification for the Brotherhood's status to remain outside the law. These two issues remain a divisive point between me and the Muslim Brotherhood. Aside from that, there are some ideological differences which I've had with the Brotherhood's leaders over the years. But I think that is a positive aspect of the movement, the fact that its leaders can disagree. As for my presidential nomination, this arose from my beliefs and principles. How can I say in 2007 that political participation must happen away from the Muslim Brotherhood, then nominate myself as the Brotherhood's candidate for president in 2011. That's why, when I decided to run for office, I decided to do so as an independent and decided to resign from the Brotherhood. This is the truth, regardless of the rumours that have circulated since my nomination. I do not want the Muslim Brotherhood to have a candidate, and when they initially said that they would not field one, I was happy. However, when the leadership of the Brotherhood reversed this decision and reneged on their credibility and promises by nominating a candidate for the presidency, it became clear to me that those differences between us remained. That said, I wish all the other candidates the best of luck, and I am sure that this election will take place in a civilized and clean manner.
Let's move to your specific agenda in this presidential race. You state that you want a civic state on an Islamic basis. What precisely does that mean?
دولة مدنية الإسلام لا يعرف بداية الدولة الدينية ولا يوجد.
First, Islam does not recognize a theocratic state. There has never been a theocratic state in the history of Sunni Islam. What I mean by this is a state run by a ruler chosen by God who governs by divine decrees away from the will of the people who can only obey their ruler. This idea is alien to Islam. In fact, in Islamic thought, the state is a civilian state, meaning the government or ruler is elected by the people, who are also capable of removing him and calling him to account, meaning the legislative bodies which introduce laws, the parliament must be elected by the people, that these laws are monitored by the constitutional court, which rules according to the constitution. A civilian state, according to Islamic thought, must have a constitution written by the people which defines the roles and responsibilities of all authoritative bodies. This is the understanding of a civilian state based on Islamic thought and ideology.
يلزم كافة هيئات الدولة وسلطاتها.
You can call this a modern state, a civilian state, or a democratic state. This modern state is in harmony with Islamic thought because Sunni Islam has never recognized a theocratic state.
What does that mean, though, to those who people might see as minorities? The Christians, for example, the people who have no religion, the atheists. What does your view of state mean to those people who are not Muslims within a state that is Muslim?
لما نقول إن دولة عربية لا يعني إن كل من.
If we were to say an Arab state, it doesn't necessarily mean that all its citizens are Arabs. Similarly, with a Muslim country, it doesn't mean that all its citizens are Muslim. Or if you were to say a Christian country, it doesn't mean all its citizens are Christians. If that were the case, then it would be a racist state. According to Islamic thought, the state embraces all its citizens, be they Muslim or non-Muslim. That's why there are equal rights and responsibilities for all citizens, according to Islamic thought. So Egyptian Christians will enjoy exactly the same rights and responsibilities as Egyptian Muslims. There is no difference. Islam does not discriminate based on gender, religion, colour, and the new constitution must not either. The appointment of people to office or other government jobs must be based on merit and capability and not gender or religion or even political inclination. That is our understanding.
Let's just briefly move to the question of international affairs. If you are president, you'd be directing the affairs of this country. Who do you think is Egypt's natural allies in the world?
أنا قلت إن إحنا مصر كدولة عريقة ودولة محورية في العالم كله يجب أن.
Because Egypt is a strategic country, it's important that we open up to the entire world. In terms of our foreign policy, Egypt must not be a follower or be subservient to any power. Egypt must work with the entire international community, be it East or West, China, America, Europe. Our natural strategic partner, based on our national security, is the Arab world. Then comes our relationship with Africa, particularly because of the River Nile, which represents Egypt's lifeline. Also, we have our relationship with the Islamic world, which we are part of.
Specifically, though, many would contend that the US, the United States, a very important partner and ally of Egypt. That relationship is defined by Egypt's relationship with Israel. The US has made that quite clear. Do you believe that this skews, diverts Egypt's ability to exercise its own sovereign affairs? This linkage of US relationship with Israel's relationship with Egypt?
احنا في الجمهورية الثانية وبعد ثورة 25 يناير.
In the Second Republic and following the revolution, Egypt's foreign policy must be independent from any other country. Our relationship with the United States must be exactly that, a relationship with the United States, and not one indirectly with Israel. That relationship should have nothing to do with Israel. Whether our relationship with America is strong or not, this depends on how receptive American policy is to Egypt's interests. Whether or not we will have a relationship with Israel also depends on our national interests. That said, the US should revise some of its positions that are illegal and inhumane, like making its relationship with Egypt dependent on our relationship with Israel. And the same applies to any other country. I am against the idea that a country ties its relationship with Egypt to a third country or third party. My foreign policy is not based on wider alliances. It is based on bilateral relations, be that with America, with China, or with European countries. I want to work towards forming bilateral relations because I believe they best service developmental and economic projects in Egypt. As for the multi-party relationships formed and founded by the old regime, I do not depend on them. The peace treaty with Israel will continue, but it will be revised. The articles in it which are in Egypt's interests will be kept. Those which are detrimental to and are against Egypt's interests will be taken out. Because if I am elected, I will be a president responsible for the interests of all Egyptians. That is why nothing will define my position with regards to any international treaty except that which is in the interests of the Egyptian people and Egypt as a whole.
I just want to take you back, though, to the 25th of January last year. You were outside the steps of the Supreme Court, a revolution underway. Many didn't realize it. You were one of the first in Tahrir Square. You set up the field hospitals there as part of your role as General Secretary of the Arab Physicians Union. Did you realize at that point that a year later, just over a year later, you'd be running for president? Did you foresee it on that day?
احنا حينما قامت الثورة كان يسيطر علينا جميعا هو اسقاط النظام الفاسد المستبد.
When the revolution started, the only thing on our minds was the removal of the corrupt and oppressive regime, which unfortunately was being protected by foreign countries, despite their belief that the regime was indeed corrupt and oppressive. This is what preoccupied me and nothing else. When the regime fell, it was only natural to start thinking about how the country should be governed, and that's when many of the young and those who had been leading the revolution began searching for a president. Many of them approached me and persuaded me to nominate myself in order to serve my country.
In conclusion, you were in prison many times, both under Sadat and under Mubarak. You told a court once that Egypt is more important to you than your freedom. Do you believe that what has happened justifies that position, justifies all those years in prison, all that suffering? Do you believe what is happening now is a good result of all of that?
There is no doubt that the toppling of Mubarak's oppressive and corrupt regime was a good thing. Not just the toppling of the individual Mubarak, but the regime which had insulted the honor of the Egyptian people, stolen their wealth, funneled Egypt's resources to foreign countries that do not serve our interests. Toppling this despised and ugly regime is a nationalist success which we as Egyptians are proud of. We are proud of the January the 25th revolution, which rose up against one of the worst, most corrupt, most oppressive regimes in the world. The fact that the people managed to topple the regime and continue their path towards democracy is something that brings me satisfaction.
Aboul Fotouh, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.